we can agree to disagree on different preferences that we have, but we have to focus in on the gospel. And those minor things shouldn't be an occasion for us to split with each other over, or for us to cause dissension inside the church.
Welcome back to this week's episode of The Follow-Up, where we recap this week's sermon so you can grow deeper in your relationship with Jesus. I'm your Pastor Bill and Pastor Adam. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you guys, too. We're officially done with the book of Romans, which is crazy.
It's been so long. It's been awesome,
though.
though.
Good journey.
It's been a good journey, absolutely. So we're going to do a few questions specifically from Romans 16, and then we've got a few just wrap-up questions as we're finishing up this season of The Follow-Up. So the beginning of Romans 16 talks about like giving honor to a lot of the people that had helped Paul throughout his journey. So I'd be curious to know from you guys, who has been someone or a couple people in your life that have been beneficial to you in your ministry journey?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I would go all the way back to when I was like 18, 19, and I was part of a church up there in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. And I had a Sunday school teacher who was just really passionate about the Bible. And I remember going from like the student Sunday school to the adult Sunday school. And even though I think at the time I was like 18, still in high school, I like joined the adult Bible study on Sunday. And he was just like so prepared, so passionate about it, and so encouraging of me being interested in ministry. It made a huge impact on me. And then my pastor at the time as well, shout out to Daryl Boomer. He actually, just the way he taught the Bible, he had a lot of, I guess, prep time in the chapter, in the passage, and would walk through each line by line for it. And that made a huge impact on me because I was like, wow, I'm understanding the Bible in a way that I never have before. So not only was it what these guys did in ministry, but it was the relationship that I had with them that really impacted me all those years ago, even to today. Like, I'm still modeling a lot of what they did with ministry and how they treated people and how they taught God's word. So
yeah, I had some similarities with that. I think back to like when I was in high school, guys like Mark Wilkie, Dave Ambrose, that were a huge influence on me as far as understanding what it means to walk with Jesus, and that discipled me, that I would meet with after school regularly, and we would do Bible studies together. And my pastor growing up really exposed me to expository preaching of, how to communicate what the Bible is saying for what's written right there. I think about times when I was between ministry and just seeking God's face and the struggle of that, and someone that came alongside and would just encourage and pray for me. Rick Ralston was his name out in Portland. And so just along the lines, people that were both in ministry as well as people that were not vocationally in ministry, but were just an encouragement and a support, and how much that was valued in those different seasons of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I can think back for me, in middle school, I had a really great youth leader. Her name's Marie LaCour, and she was fun. I was a really like goody two shoes, really straight firstborn daughter. Like, you don't stray from the rules, which meant I was not a fun person, but like she was really fun. And I was like, wait, people who follow Jesus can be fun?
Yeah.
Like, this is... It was this like just mind-blowing thing to me. So having her like throughout my middle school and high school years was huge. And then on the ministry side of things, Deb Sleeby, who's our kids men director, saw me when I was 16. We were from the same church down in Appleton together, and just like really took me under her wing and like gave me leadership at what I thought like was such a young age, to like put me in charge of certain ministry areas, and just like learning from her. And it's full circle that now we're back doing ministry together in just different contexts. It's been really, really awesome.
That's cool.
Moving on into Romans 16, there's a section in there that warns against division that happens. So how can we guard ourselves against division when it happens in the church?
I think the big thing in all of Romans is a reminder of what it is that unites us. It's the gospel that unites us. And so the big warning with Romans 16 is the division that can happen from false teaching or getting our eyes off of the gospel, Sometimes that's preferences that we can have, or even strong convictions, but some of those convictions are not necessarily things that we should divide over. And so there may be some times when division can be helpful for the sake of the gospel, in that there can be different visions that people have and different ways in which churches function, where it's like, okay, we see this differently, but for the sake of the gospel, we're going to continue to be about the gospel, but we're going to do it in different ways. And I think there's a place for that and wisdom in that. But in the regular aspects of just doing life together, the importance of keeping the main thing, and making sure that our hearts are in the right place, so that we are not a distraction to somebody else because of sinful choices we're making, or getting our own mess involved in it. And so just keeping short accounts, and each of us have a part to play in that, as far as our attitudes towards one another and our focus on Jesus.
Yeah, that's really good. I would say something really similar, in the sense of, I think sometimes we elevate preferences that we have for things to the level of like gospel level things.
Right.
And that divides a church often. Like, and it's silly, but like it even goes to sometimes the level of like, well, what color did we choose for the chairs in our worship center? What does the carpet look like? How do I want this room set up? Or do we name this ministry this thing or this thing? And sometimes Christians can just like clash over these things and even split over these things. Right. And there can be animosity and division over those things. And so like you said, Adam, like for me, I put it in terms of keeping the main thing. And the main thing is the gospel. Mm-hmm. And so like, we can agree to disagree on different preferences that we have, but we have to focus in on the gospel. Mm-hmm. And those minor things shouldn't be an occasion for us to split with each other over, or for us to cause dissension inside the church. And so I think it's really important that we hone in on the gospel, and that's where our lives are oriented. Mm-hmm. And that allows us to stay unified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even thinking in the context of life groups, Adam, I think this is something that you do really well. I remember when you had first gotten here, we had a lot of division, just like age and gender, of like how groups were going to be. And then you came in and you're like, no, we're going to mix this up. Like, we're all unified in the gospel. So your group is going to be demographically, it's going to look different. Mm-hmm. And I honestly was a little taken aback. I really, I don't want to change.
It's a stretch.
Yeah. But I will say my life group that I had right after you got here, I can remember my son had just been born, and it was amazing because we were new parents, and there was another couple in the group who had like gone to college with my husband, and like so similar age. And then, I mean, we're talking decade jumps after that. Yeah. But the way that they, like, all of us rallied around like us as we were having like, my son, like, we're trying to figure out how to raise this baby, and they're like, oh yeah, we got this. Like, yeah. Oh yeah, we know what we're doing. Like, some of them are grandparents or they have older kids. They're like, oh, we got you. What you're dealing with right now? Oh, don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. And like the peace that came from, that I wouldn't have gotten if I was just in a group of early 20s, just trying to figure out life. So I just want to say like how invaluable that has been for Spring Lake. And anytime I hear pushback from people of like, well, I really just want to be with people my own age who look and think like me, I remind them of that, of like how stretching it is for us to like get outside of our comfort zone of being able to be with people who act differently, think differently, or even like theologically are not the same as like way I think on those minor topics. So thank you for that.
That's
thank
awesome.
You for shaking things up for us.
Yeah, very cool, Carrie.
Last question for Romans 16. What do you think is the importance that this passage ends in praise?
I mean, I think we both kind of talked about this, but the essential idea at the end is this is what everything is pointing towards, right? Like all of Romans, the gospel, all of it, the Bible, our lives, the church's life, all of it is actually really supposed to point towards the glory of God. And because God is so glorious, he deserves our worship. He's worthy of us worshiping him. And so we're like, I love that Paul ends this way, because he's reminding them, yes, all of these things about the gospel are true. All of its implications are true. All of it is essential for life. But the idea is that because it's true, we should glorify God. And God deserves all of the glory for everything we're about. And that's how we should orient our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I agree with all of that, Bill. I think, where we can be prone to read our Bibles and just go directly to application, which is where I think like chapters 12 through 15, where it becomes really practical. It's like, oh, okay, we got out of the theological stuff and now we're in the practical stuff of how I just live this out. But really the gospel, all of it is about how it impacts us, transforms us, and ultimately the transforming is to bring us in line with the character and the goodness of God, of how we were created to be in his image, how we were created to have relationship with him and to reflect him, and that he's the one that has made this all possible, of what was broken, of how he's restored it. And so ultimately the implications of the gospel of how we are to be, it's not simply about being good or moral. It's about people that are living in relationship with Jesus for his glory. So we praise God for that. God, thank you for what you've done for us in that. And so I think on that note, it's so important. So we don't just see the gospel as, well, that's what gets me to heaven, and now I just have to be really good.
Right.
It's about keeping the glory of God central in all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we think about Romans as a whole, what was something that surprised you or struck out to you in a fresh way as you were studying through this book this season?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like studying it all back to back and not just like zooming in on something and then going to something else the next week. I think studying it and being in it this long, I really appreciated how comprehensive the exploration of the gospel was throughout the whole thing. Like you have right away in the beginning establishing like our natural spiritual condition. And then it switches in chapters 4 to 5 where you begin to learn about, well, then how can we be made right with God? How can we be justified? Well, it is through belief in Jesus Christ and what he's done for us. And then like the rest of the book is like an exploration of like the implications of that and how we're supposed to live in God's universal, his big plan for salvation that includes both Jews and Gentiles, and that he owns that, he owns the sovereignty of that. Like all of that, like each part of it is amazing, but when you put it all together, you're like, wow, like the just the vastness and the intricacy of God's plan of salvation is just really awesome. And that's like the overwhelming sense I got from it is like, as we went through it, is like, wow, we're still in Romans. And the next week we're still in Romans, and now we're looking at a different, you're viewing the same thing from a different lens or a different aspect of it. And I just really appreciated that. And it's easy to see why a lot of commentators call it like a gospel treaty.
Yeah.
Because it's like a treaty document, like this official document essentially of what the gospel is. And so I love that for it. Like I love studying Romans for that bigness that you can see of the gospel message.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, just a reminder just of the richness and the depth of the gospel, reading through it again and having everything in its context of seeing what God has done for us through Christ. And that, even as we got into some of those trickier passages, Romans 9 through 11, to see that the gospel was not an afterthought of God. And so it was a reminder for me of just the refreshing, the renewal that comes from just basking in what God has done for us, that we can't take any credit for, that he has done out of his own goodness and grace, and that we're recipients of that, how that transforms our thinking in our life. For me, just that refreshing that happened. Just seeing it in its scope was just an encouragement for my heart. And realizing again, just the implications that come out of that, and the reminder of for anyone, regardless of their struggle, you can have this hope as well. And I want you to know this hope. And so what it is that propels that kind of hope, that kind of joy, that we have the opportunity to share that, it's an incredible opportunity.
Absolutely.
And so it's been really good to be reminded of that.
Yeah. If someone wanted to start reading Romans on their own, what would you tell them to look for or pay close attention to?
This is a great question. I mean, it's hard, right? Because there's like so much there. But I think I would say look for the different, like we did this weekend where we broke it down. I think it's really helpful to have a framework when you approach Romans. And so if you start reading Romans in chapter 1, by the time you get to chapter 3, you're going to feel like, man, this is heavy.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember that in the very beginning?
Oh yeah.
There was a real big
All of
heaviness.
you have blown it.
Yes.
Yeah.
All of you fall short.
And I remember preaching, like, I think I preached 2 within there. And I think they were like a couple weeks apart or whatever. But I remember being like, it's felt heavy for a while now, like 4 weeks of heaviness as we've gone through this. But then when you get to 4 through 6, essentially, you're like, okay, now it's turning a corner and like I'm seeing the light, I'm seeing the hope. And so I think I would tell somebody, like, as you approach Romans, like intentionally look up what the framework of Romans is. So you can orient yourself while you're going through the book. Like, yes, I'm here, but God said this before this, and he's going to begin talking about this later. And I think that would really help people, is just knowing the framework of Romans.
Yeah, I would agree. It's like, don't skip out on the bad news to get to the good news.
Right.
Like in Romans 5, that it's the bad news with how Romans starts that reveals the significance of the good news and why we celebrate the good news, because we are utterly incapable ourselves. But I would encourage the person to track what they see has been done by God through Jesus throughout. And I think, you know, how Paul starts it out, and we've done this a few times throughout the series of just highlighting Romans 1:16, where Paul's saying, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, you know, and then all of Romans is carrying that out of the power of God for salvation. How do we see the whole scope of that? And so I think just like a TV series or something that does a recap, you know, before they get into that episode, it's helpful for people to kind of look back at what you've already read in order to understand the link for the next chapter to come, so that every day or however you do your Bible study, that you're linking those thoughts together. And I think that's what's really helpful in understanding the whole. But look at the work of Jesus, what he's accomplished for you, that propels how you are to live.
I love that. So, Bill, can you share us a little bit about what's coming up next for the follow-up?
Yeah, so we've been doing this follow-up for this whole series, which has been a long time. And so we've gone all the way through Romans. And for the summer, actually, we're jumping into a new sermon series called Summer Road Trip. And that series essentially is kind of like along the path of life. Like, what are some of the road signs or things that God is talking to you about? And the pastor actually in this series gets to choose their passage. And so you'll have a lot of variety this summer, which is really exciting. But if you attend Spring Lake, I just want to tell you that you should actually stay at the campus that you start at.
Stay in your lane.
Stay in your lane.
Summer road trip.
Because if you switch back and forth from downtown to Bellevue, it's not a big deal. It's all one church, but you will hear the same sermon twice, right? So make sure you are strategic about that. But we will actually not be doing the follow-up because of that, because you have 2 different messages at 2 different campuses. So if we came together on Monday, we'd be talking about 2 different sermons. We didn't think it was going to work so well. And so we won't be actually doing the follow-up for the remainder of the summer. But then in the fall, we're actually jumping into the book of John together. And so I'm super excited about that. We all decided really as pastors that we thought it was time for us to be back in the Gospels, and we chose the book of John. So I'm super excited for that, and the follow-up will come back in the fall for that. So
before we wrap up, lightning round question. Before we're jumping into summer road trip, what is your go-to road trip snack?
Ooh, mine's really boring. I really just love a good sparkling water.
Oh, that is
I
boring.
have to
Do you
have
drink it in the
As a
can
snack? Wow.
on
Yes,
the road
like-
trip?
Okay, so the car we bought, we didn't realize when we bought it, because we bought it used. We didn't know this. But after we bought it, we realized the car that we have, the van that we have, has a little thing at the bottom that you can open and put cans in there and close it, and then you press a button and the air conditioning runs in there.
No way.
And so it cools.
That is so cool.
It cools it.
Yeah,
and
no kidding.
Wow.
And it's not even
Right.
a fancy. It's not even really a fancy car.
I would
It's just
never
like
have expected that.
that's like, and so I
Why don't we
put
just have to hang out the window?
so I'll put like I'll put sparkling waters in there, and then I like turn the button on in the summer, and then like you kind of forget about it. Like I totally this last road trip I took, I kind of forgot about it, and then I was like, oh man, I could really go for something cold and sparkly, and then I was like, oh yes, and I opened it up, and I'm like, ba-ba.
Wow,
It just kept me going, you know.
that's cool.
Yeah.
I would say one of mine is mixed berry gummy worms. You know, the purple and the pink ones. Yeah, like something gummy, but then usually get some kind of chips or something. So you kind of get your salty sweet, depending on how long of a road trip.
Yeah,
you know, but usually the gummy worms are always part of it.
How about you, Carrie?
So nerd gummy clusters are usually my go-to.
Yes.
Can't have a lot because they give me a headache real fast.
It must be all those synthetic dyes.
I mean, you know, when you're trying to cut them out and then you just eat a whole handful, it happens.
Yeah.
And then any kind of chip, like I'm not a big chip eater, but just kidding. I got this now. Our kids asked about it today. Puff corn.
Like Pirate's Booty or something like that?
Yes. We love it. I'm all about it.
Yeah.
So those would be probably our go-tos.
Nice.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys for joining us to wrap up Romans. And we will see you guys in the fall as we kick off the book of John. Make sure you are subscribed because there are going to be different video content coming your way on YouTube. And we will see you guys in September as we kick off the book of John.